Both leaders had very different agendas. Let's return to the President Putin speech for a moment. Did he make any mention in terms of sanctions? Did it come across that he needed sanctions to end?
He didn't make a powerful case for ending them. He said the sanctions have been responsible external threats that have caused some problems, but they've weathered them, they've stabilized, and now it's time for you investors to come back and look at all the things we're going to do. And I would say, well, where have you been all of these years that you've been in power? And you're now talking about having an educational system that promotes investment in technology and to become a world-class economy. They've got brilliant scientists. There's great human capital, intellectual capital in Russia. The question is, are there going to be structural reforms in Russia to eliminate the corruption, the oligarchs, and the rule of law, as opposed to the law of rule of President Putin?
Secretary Cohen, I was struck by that as well, really talking about vocational training, HR training, improving the quality of mid-level managers, encouraging small and medium enterprises, encouraging non-raw exports. These are things, as you say, that Russia could have been doing for 2 decades.
Exactly.
Since the last time you were negotiating with them in 1997. We also have Anders Corr with us on the desk. Anders, you know, your ears sort of perked up when you heard the word Eurasian Union.
Right. I mean, what Putin is trying to do is he's trying to close ranks with China. He's trying to close ranks with the other former Soviet republics. And he wants to create, he really wants to go back to an old Warsaw Bloc approach to economics, where Russia and its allied countries were impervious to U.S. and European sanctions. That's what he's doing. He's looking at an autarkic economic system where trade is happening between these autocracies, and they can then really act with impunity on their borders, on their territorial borders in terms of expansion of influence, and not worry about economic sanctions from the West.
Secretary Cohen, he also talked about the Silk Road. I thought that was interesting that he made explicit mention of that. There are 2 ways to look at that. You know, one is there is going to be more cooperation between Russia and China. The other is we have our sphere of influence. If you recognize that, we recognize what you're doing. That's your sphere. This is ours.
Well, it's interesting to look at the lineup. Following the Greek Prime Minister, you also had Zhang Gaoli, one of the most powerful figures in China, one of the top 7 as such. He was speaking third in line. I think his message will be mutual respect, equal responsibility, border security type of thing. And so his position in the lineup is very important, the signal saying that we're with Russia in terms of promoting better trade relationships with the big powers.
I think the Chinese market is incredibly important to Russia. Obviously, if Russia's not selling its gas and oil to Europe, it's got to sell it to Russia, and that's what we already see. So that Silk Road is incredibly important. It's going to be silk dipped in oil. That's what it is.
Silk dipped in oil. Anders, Prime Minister Tsipras, you know, gave a pretty confident speech as well. European leaders will have been watching that, though. Did he get any kind of message across? He said people were asking him why he was in Russia, and he's exploring other avenues.
Well, the message I get from Tsipras is not one it's actually between the lines. He was speaking to a Russian audience. You'd expect that he would say strong pro-Russian things. Actually, he did not. He really walked a middle line. He walked a tightrope between Russia and the European Union. And I think that by walking that tightrope in that context, we're really seeing that he wants to stay with the European Union. What he's doing is actually akin to diplomatic terrorism by going to Russia and threatening, playing footsie with Russia. I think it's unfortunate that the ECB gave into that diplomatic terrorism by immediately, you know,
raising the ELA ceiling. We should just recap that by €3 billion, which will get them, you know, a week or 2, but it's not exactly a huge, you know.
And that is huge. That, you know, the ECB is not supposed to be a political institution, but that was absolutely a political decision
really
to give Greece just enough time for this negotiation to happen. We're going to go to Hans Nichols in Luxembourg in a little bit on that. But first, let's go to Ryan Chilcott in St. Petersburg. Ryan, I was struck hearing words like, well, of course, there was a classic Vladimir Vladimir Putin tweak. He quoted the price of oil in euros, but not dollars. But he also said the word adapted, that the finance system has adapted, that since the sanctions were instituted, that they have been focusing on actual non-raw goods exports. Has the Russian economy, now that it's had several months to respond, is it actually in the process of rebalancing?
No, the Russian economy is not rebalancing. There's no doubt about that. I mean, rebalancing, I guess, would involve diversification. We haven't seen any of that. There's a lot of talk about the need for the Russian economy to diversify. What we have seen is a little bit of the panic that we had last year, say, at this forum, when the first round of sanctions had just been introduced after the annexation of Crimea. That's gone away. You know, the economy is, as they keep saying, in a little bit better shape than some people thought it might be. That's kind of a loaded statement, to be fair, Brendan, because if you think about it, who are these people? The economy's still in really bad shape. It's set to contract by 4%. You know, the oil price, Brent, $63, really bad for Russia. This means, you know, that real incomes will fall. Pensions, which have been indexed to inflation for the last decade, that can't happen anymore. I mean, inflation in this country is at 16%. So it's a way to kind of change the narrative. Things are, you know, rough, but they're not nearly as rough as they could have been. And I think that's the focus here. He's trying to control the narrative. And as far as the sanctions are concerned, say, hey, we've readjusted. You can keep your sanctions in place as long as you want. We're playing ball in Ukraine. We're not going to change what we're doing in Ukraine anyway, because it's not us. And by the way, we've, you know, sorted things out here at home, so they're not really hurting us. We're open for business. Why don't you just, you know, be friends with us? That's his message.
Ryan Chilcote in St. Petersburg saying that Russia's economy is still very much based on gas and oil. It is not a manufacturing economy, as he would like to describe it. We have former Secretary of Defense William Cohen with us on the desk. Did Russia miss a chance? Was there a time in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, when it could have chosen a different path, or is this inevitable?
Well, it could have chosen the path that Poland did, to make a transformation in its approach to establishing a democracy, having a market economy. They missed that chance. Now, what Putin is saying is we're going to do that now. And it's a bit late at this point in time.
Did you get the sense in the late 90s, when you were speaking with them, that that was a real possibility?
Well, I did. I also was dealing with and talking to Boris Yeltsin at the time, President Gorbachev, who was talking about perestroika, glasnost. So there was a sense at that time that here you have a big country, a great country with brilliant people. There was an opportunity at that point to make the transformation to a market economy and to democracy.
Just want to return to Luxembourg. We have Hans Nichols standing by there and point out that the euro is down about 0.5%, the ruble weakening substantially during that speech. Hans, who will have been listening to that? We had some headlines from Jean-Claude Juncker speaking about Tsipras as he was speaking to the audience in St. Petersburg.
Well, what leaders want to hear from Tsipras is some sort of indication that he is going to come to the table on Monday with new proposals. And there's been no indication, and there wasn't an indication from Moscow that he plans to do so. One quick note, guys, on European, the emergency liquidity assistance out of the ECB. We still don't have a firm number for how much it was raised by. The request was for $3 billion. We don't know whether or not the ECB Governing Council satisfied that request, met that request. That is going to be a key number to try to figure out in the next couple of minutes, if not hours. Guys?
Hans Nichols traveling all over Europe, now at Luxembourg. Thank you for joining us. You will, of course, be somewhere else when the negotiations move on somewhere else over the course of the weekend. Ryan Chilcote in St. Petersburg, bringing us live coverage from the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Thank you both. On the desk, we have William Cohen, former Secretary of Defense. Real quick, 10 seconds or less. Did Putin accomplish what he set out to accomplish in this speech?
I don't think so. I think he said what he had to say, but it wasn't powerful enough or persuasive to me.
And as Vonnie pointed out, the ruble is actually dropping during his speech. So very specifically, we have actual measurement of the fact that he is not getting it done.
Equity markets, though, just slightly positive, both in Athens and in Russia.